Good evening and welcome to the Sound Off program. My name is Linda Kirker. I host the show and I thank you so much for tuning in tonight. I really appreciate that. And as we go along with the program, the phone number to call in will be up on the screen. Should you choose to call in with a comment or a question, we would love to have you do that. But give us a little time to get the show up and rolling. I want to start the program tonight with a poem that I wrote this week. I hope you enjoy it. I'm grateful to live, yeah, Linda, right, I'll start over. I'm grateful to live in the land of the free, a gift that was given to you and me by the founding heroes who pledged their fortunes and lives so that they and their ancestors could happily thrive. With individual rights, freedoms, and opportunities galore. Now we wonder what our future holds and what is in store. Today we are faced with a similar fight to preserve and protect our precious rights and to teach American history to our youth, to their delight. For they are the future defenders of all that makes America great. There's no room for divisiveness, bitterness, and hate. For united we stand, divided we fall. The questions we must ask are, will our Constitution be revered? Do we have the will and the courage to stand up and fight, to preserve America's unique blessings with all of our might? Let there be light from above to guide us, and the love of God to strengthen us. May God bless America, our flag, and our national anthem, and all who serve and strive to protect and honor them in the land of the free and the home of the brave. Those are my thoughts for this week. I've never shared a poem before, but I couldn't resist. Now I'd like to introduce my two guests. They're first-timers on Sound Off. To my far left is Pat McDonald. Pat,
nice to be here.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And to my immediate left is Eric LaMontagne.
Thanks for having
Welcome,
me.
Eric. Yes, both of these folks are involved with, well, Pat's the president
right.
of the board of Campaign for Vermont.
Correct, right.
And Eric is the executive director,
Yes.
correct?
Correct.
And Pat, why don't you just give us a little quick summary of your background, because I know you have, you were the head of the agency motor vehicle,
Yes,
right?
I was. I
Department?
actually had 6 appointed positions, believe it or not. I worked for Governor Snelling, Governor Dean, and Governor Douglas.
Holy
And I
mackerel.
won't go through the whole list, but in summary, I had 25 years experience in private sector and then 25 in the public sector here in Vermont. I was in the legislature for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see, after that I ran Phil Scott's campaign for his first campaign for lieutenant governor. And now for the last couple of years I've been doing a TV show on Orca Media, which is in Montpelier, called Vote for Vermont, which is how I got involved with Campaign for Vermont. Because years ago I had worked for Campaign for Vermont when Bruce Listman was active in the organization. I wrote to them and said, maybe we could partner, because many of the shows I was doing were very much in line with what Campaign for Vermont is doing. And fortunately, they said yes, and we've been working together. Ben Kinsley, who was the former executive director, is a co-host on the show with me, and
Yeah, I know Ben.
Seems to want to stay. He's left Campaign for Vermont to start his own business and also to work full-time for, what is the name of his company?
His business is Imperium.
Imperium, that's right.
Imperium.
Imperium, yeah. I think
I
it's,
don't know what that means.
I think it's
You'll have
mostly,
to have him on.
Yes, exactly. Data
will.
collection, which is right up his speed and in information information, I think.
Well, I know
But
you've
he's a good
been
guy.
active and involved impressively for
Yes.
many years, Pat.
Yep, I'm here.
And
I was on your show years ago when I was head of the GOP, for the state GOP.
No
You-
kidding.
You and I, we were in the old studio. It was a long time ago.
Oh, yeah.
So
Well, I've been doing the show for 12 years,
there you go.
so it's very possible.
Yeah.
My memory is,
Oh, I know. I just remembered where the old studio was
and the high school.
and the high school. That's right.
Yes, yeah, we just moved recently. I think this is my third show here.
Oh, that's great. It's
So
a
we're
beautiful
getting-
studio.
Isn't
Good
it
for you.
wonderful?
Yeah.
Yeah, very
You
fortunate.
still smell the new paint.
So Eric, tell us a little bit about you.
So I am born and raised Vermonter. I grew up in North Thetford. It's one of those towns where there's not
Nobody
a whole
knows.
lot of not a whole lot of reason to know it. So I went to school and came to Burlington, the big city, for college. First generation of my family to go to college. Grew up. My father has a landscaping company based in the Upper Valley. So ever since I was old enough to dig a hole, he would have me working out there with him and planting. And I
work.
learned to drive by plowing driveways with him at 11 years old. We'd go to the
Perfect.
parking lots at 3 o'clock in the morning and switch seats, and he'd sleep, and I'd just wake him up if I put it in a ditch or something like that.
Well, live and learn, right?
And I went to college in Vermont, and I kept having plans to escape for a few years and go see how the other half lives outside of New England. But I can't seem to escape Vermont. So here I am.
Oh, well,
And
welcome.
We're glad of it. He's excellent. He's really great to work with and an awesome writer and a very good person that analyzes policy. And
Oh, that's
excellent
great.
for the organization.
Wonderful. Well, you two are on a roll, huh?
Yes, we are.
Excited for what's down the road for sure.
Yes. Well, there's a great need. And a lot of it is about education, right?
Oh, yes.
About covering various issues and topics and getting the word out there about what's going on.
Yeah.
And then people can make decisions.
That's exactly what we try to do. The tagline of the show is listening beyond the sound bites, because you only hear little sound bites and people have no idea what's behind the sound bites and what the whole story is. So
Exactly.
we're trying to do that to get the
So
word out.
it takes people like us to want to share
Right.
what's happening, and hopefully people are paying attention, and because I don't know where else you go.
Well, and that's exactly right. There's one of the things the Campaign for Vermont really tries to tackle is the sense of apathy that is developing both statewide, nationally, but when it comes to being involved with our politics
Right.
and being involved with the systems that make our lives tick day to day, there's this
Absolutely.
a sense of apathy around this, and this disenchantment that's currently happening where folks feel like either their voice isn't being heard or their opinion doesn't matter, or the process of getting your ideas forward and actually having that conversation with a representative, it's such a daunting task that people are just saying, they're going to the voting booth and they're voting, and that's the only engagement that they have in the political system.
Well, that's the case in many instances, but I also wonder how much they know about the people that they're voting for.
Right.
My what I've told people on this show many, many times is, look, you have the privilege and the right and the responsibility to vote. And along with that goes being a responsible, informed voter.
Right.
Okay? So when you see someone who's running, and say it's locally or statewide, and you happen to be face to face with them, you don't run up and tell them what you want. You say, where do you stand on
right.
X, which is something very important to you, okay? You don't say, hey, I want you to do this. You say, how would you handle this? And then you find out where they really are coming from, hopefully.
Right.
And
I don't think people know how their representatives vote on just about anything. Unless it's in the papers, because they're nice. You see them at the events, and they're they're chatting, and you just assume that you're all on the same wavelength, but you may not be.
Well, when I've had Rob Roper on the show, he explained about the Ethan Allen voting
Oh,
log.
yes, their record, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Of every person in the House and Vermont Senate. And then there's also their contact information.
Right.
Plus, on the most important critical issues, their votes are recorded.
Yep.
So if you want to know, you just go to ethanallen.org and you look up how people voted on certain things. But just to go and give your vote without really knowing, is scary.
Yeah, and a lot of it too is the policies themselves that are going through, especially when it comes to policies that involve money, are too complicated for the everyday person who's trying to raise a family and take care of their day-to-day to sit down and read a House bill that's 80 pages long. Right. And that's where the role of organizations like Campaign for Vermont, shows like yours, shows like Vote for Vermont, where there's a really important need that we can serve, which is distilling those topics and bringing it to people and saying, here's what they're looking to do, here's how it will affect you. Make your informed decision on how you would like to vote for this, and then here's how you get in touch with the people that are going to be voting on your behalf, the legislators. Here's how you can get in touch with them and tell them what you think.
Because there was an example this year, the independent school bill. When
It's
you
a great
read that
example.
bill, it looked like they were making sure that the independent schools were financially sound, and they just had a little reference to the Board of Ed's rules. Well, when you really looked at that bill, they were sort of out to get the independent schools and hopefully have them close their doors. And Eric wrote a great op-ed on it. We did a show on it. But you read that bill, you would have no idea what was underneath that the language, right?
And that's a great example where you have a bill that on paper it looks really positive, but when you actually implement it and put it into practice, the results of that are completely different than what you would expect.
Exactly. We don't put things together to get the complete picture about what the outcome will be.
And it's really hard. You can't expect citizens to be able to do that unless they're involved in political junkies like we are, which is why I think these shows are so important, or articles in the paper that really show both sides. And if somebody understands an issue and votes differently than me, I'm actually okay with that. If they can explain to me why they voted that way and they have a good reason. And if you made that decision, good for you, and vote.
Yeah, and I tend to look at the fundamentals of the state, the financial, the education of our youth for the future. They're going to be the leaders and the business owners and the educators and the medical people and so much more. And so it's so critically important that they get the best education possible. And unfortunately, Vermont is one of the states that signed on to Common Core.
Right, which is fortunately, hopefully going away, is it not?
I don't know.
I haven't heard.
I think sounds
In
like
Vermont?
Well, no, I think it's an option, but I think the federal government is allowing you to back away if you'd like to.
It's up to the states to back away.
Right.
They all bit because they were given several $1 million to buy into it, so to speak, I think without even knowing what the curriculum was. But it was about needing money, so, but now we're in a place where I believe teachers and students are trapped in a failed system.
Right, I agree.
And it is not good. Parents can't even have a really good grasp of what their children are learning.
Right.
That's not good.
No.
My dad used to sit down with me at the dining room table. Math, when I was young, I could do addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. But when it got into some of the, like algebra,
Right.
that was not for me. Right. But my dad would sit there and help me,
Yeah.
and today, parents are all just not sure what the
Right,
heck's going on. And I'm surprised there aren't more private schools or homeschoolers
Well,
than
their
there are.
success rate is very commendable, what the private schools, independent schools have done.
Oh, I know.
I think they're doing, Linda, we just, as an organization, since we're all sort of new again and trying to
Sure.
get our name out there, we've come up with a goal of what we call the 3 E's.
Yes.
Ethics, economics, and education.
Perfect.
And I don't know if you know this, but Campaign for Vermont, under Ben, when he was there, really pushed the ethics bill that was their big thing, was
Yes,
to push ethics.
I remember. Yeah.
And you and I have both been in the legislature, and we know that's a good thing.
Yes, we do. I remember being asked when I was running for office, someone was getting money for candidates and called me up and said, would I accept money from X, Y, or Z? And I said, well, I know X, and yes, that would be okay. Y, you're going to have to tell me more about Y,
Right.
because I don't know anything about Y. And Z, no.
Right.
And just make it known that just because someone makes a donation, they can't tap me on the shoulder
Right.
when there's a vote, because that's not happening.
Yeah, I mean, Vermont was one of 3 states that didn't have ethics laws on the books. And yeah, the previous leaders of the organization did a great job getting that pushed through. It didn't push through. We'd like it to be stronger. It was a good starting point. I think, judging from the latest ethics panel report, there's still some work to do on exactly the overall efficacy of it.
Who's on the ethics committee? I mean, people representing different committees, or?
I think it's a blend of representatives, senators, and members from the public.
Right, so there's
I
a
don't know
private,
it's a
private executive director,
Yeah.
and then some members of the committees, I believe.
Yeah, but the latest report was really just sort of talking about startup kind of things, not really getting into the meat of the issue. And so we're going to follow that and keep putting pressure on, because
Absolutely.
that's really important.
It's,
And people that are watching your show and stuff, they need to know where to call if they see something that needs to be talked about and challenged. So I think if they know that they can go to the ethics committee and talk about what their issue is and their concerns, they have to follow up.
and we need many people. It's like I said in my poem, to stand up, speak out,
Right.
Because nothing will change if we don't do that.
Right.
And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, the idea of having to overcome that apathy in people and get people to the point where they do feel empowered within their government again. And the ethics is a great starting point for that. If people know that there is a system in place to ensure that people are doing what they're saying, and that we are actively ensuring against conflicts of interest, financial conflicts of interest, with whether it's with businesses, spouses, however that may be. That's a necessary first step to achieve that, along with really Campaign for Vermont's driving philosophy. Like our litmus test for any policies that we work on is it accountable, and is it transparent? Is that language built into the bill so that once it's enacted, it's got a system of checking in on itself, and that so then the people and the citizens can know and be confident that if there's a system in place that says exactly where the money is going and what's going to happen if something doesn't work. And so anytime we look at any policy, that's always the first thing we looked at is it accountable to the people who are paying for it, and is it transparent in terms of how it's actually all going to work?
Good. I think that's wonderful.
And we are nonpartisan, so whoever is doing something we think should be done differently or better, we will write about it regardless of party or affiliations.
Sure. And ethics should apply to
Everybody,
everybody,
for sure.
regardless.
For sure.
And I'm wondering if this ethics committee has thought about having an ethics agreement
Oh, that's interesting.
for people who are in office with an explanation of what that means
Yeah.
and what the consequences
I
would
actually
be.
think, I think we had to sign something along that line, but I would suggest it probably has to be beefed up a little from what I'm remembering.
I don't remember.
I remember it saying that we should step forward and say if we have a conflict, where did we ever work in a
I don't remember. You sure that was for the legislature?
yeah, I'm
Really?
pretty sure. Well, I was a little bit after you, so maybe. But
Maybe.
from what I'm remembering about that document, I would suggest it probably has to be beefed up just a little.
You think?
I think.
Now, okay, so ethics, I think that's
Yeah.
perfect.
And you know, people, which is interesting, the citizens, Vermonters, are very interested in that topic. You would think perhaps not, but they really want to know what's happening in that Golden Dome.
Well, they want things to be
Yeah.
on the up and up.
Yeah.
You know, we're paying dearly
Yes, we are.
for, well, income taxes are the biggest source of revenue for the state. And as we know, the governor has told us that a minimum of 2,000 people have already emigrated out of the state.
Right.
And these are people who can afford to do so. So, you know, then the state loses
Right. John.
that revenue, and we're driving people out is what we're doing. I know so many people who talk about leaving.
Right. Yeah.
And so what are the primary things that we have to do to fix this state?
Yeah. And you know, on our show, and we had leaders of the legislative, Republicans, Democrats, progressive, and they all heard the same thing during the last election about property tax, just what the exact list you just mentioned. And it didn't matter what the party was. They all said, oh, yes, we heard this, this, and this. And then you look at what was presented this year in the legislature. There was one bill, the Workforce Development Bill, that would actually, I think, accomplish something because it talked about tech ed. It just opened up the door. I think it was Representative Botso's committee, and he's been working on that for years, and he finally got a bill that went through the process, but nothing else. There's nothing else worth talking about, I don't think, as far as what needs. They talked about education. They came up with, in the beginning, I was thinking, wow, maybe we're going to have something happen. They talked about income tax. They talked about, oh, you probably followed this even closer than I did, different ways to look at property tax. And then at the end of the day, nothing happened.
Well, did they not follow through on one thing that was brought forward, which was to increase your income taxes to compensate for lowering the property tax, which is a wash? So
You can answer that.
So that's one of the things they're looking at in this. It's still a little, H911 was the bill that wanted to do the income tax surcharge. That was driving a lot of the elements in the budget. That there's the whole, veto that's gonna, if it hasn't happened, that it's promised to be happen, and so all that is still
in the air.
very, very up in the air. But when you look at the economics issue, it's a few different layers. I mean, one is making Vermont more affordable to live in. We do have a very high tax burden, but it should also be acknowledged that we do also have we live in a very beautiful state. Our quality of life in Vermont is relatively high compared to many places.
but that has nothing to do with the taxes, does it?
Well, people make, depends on what they make their decision, why they want to move here. I think students that go to school here pick Vermont because of the things, the beauty of it, the sports and that sort of stuff, and hopefully the good education they're going to get out of UVM and the other colleges we have here.
But that's the balance, and so it's we do have a high quality of life here, but yet it is also, it is difficult to establish because it is an expensive place to live. So when looking at these economic issues, it's multi-tiered. It's making it affordable to build a family here and to establish yourself here. but it's also being able to show the people who are paying the taxes that their money is being well used and that their money is actually giving them something in return. And a lot of the people that I talk to feel like they're writing this check and it's going up and up every year, and what they're getting back from that investment, from those taxes, isn't on par with what they feel that they're paying. So that goes again back to that transparency and accountability. Is when we're looking at these economic policies, are these policies going to be leveraging our tax money in a way that people are going to feel like they're getting their money out of it, getting their value for it?
There could be the best programs in the world, but if they're expensive and people can't afford it, then they don't care how good the program is, they just can't afford it.
And I'm sure you've heard this from businesses. They've been on the show and they've said, we just want predictability. How much is this going to cost me to move here? What are all the expenses? And we keep moving the goalpost, I think, because they can't get a handle on how much, and then they make their decision whether they want to move or not.
Well, and the regulations are another
That's mostly
thing.
what they're talking about.
Oh, yeah, the CON, Certificate of Need.
Right.
What was a business in Colchester that it cost them $200,000 to be able to open up a health facility in order, I guess that was in order to get all the
permits
approvals and everything. That's ridiculous.
After we got hit by Tropical Storm Irene, and people looked the other way on certain things and got roads built, and the roads are still working fine, I thought for sure the next year in the legislature we'd see changes in regulation. You don't want to ruin the state environmentally. There is a balance, and we've just gone overboard on one side, on the environmental side. I thought, but there was nothing. I couldn't believe it. I thought for sure we'd learned that sometimes you can bend the rules and make them a little less stringent and get it done just the same way.
Well, when it comes to the cost of education, this information comes from the Ethan Allen letter. Today we spend roughly $1.6 billion to educate 77,000 students K through 12. That's well over $20,000 per child, more than almost every other state in the union, and nearly twice the national average. This is more than twice the total we paid before Act 60 became law in 1997, despite we're now serving fewer than 30,000 fewer students. This was in, I don't find the date here. But anyway, he said student outcomes are not improving, and if anything, they are declining. In the latest round of standardized tests, only 48% of Vermont students were learning enough to be considered proficient in their subjects. In every category, in every grade but one, scores fell between 2016 and 2017. And this despite programs mandating and expanding universal pre-K, proficiency-based learning, and spending $31 million to incent school districts to consolidate.
Yeah, and I think we had Heidi Sherman, Representative Sherman, on the show, and I don't think she's encouraged that anything is going to happen on education at the end of this special session.
Not unless the people, like you were saying, unless the people wake up and realize that we're not getting what we're paying for.
ROI, return on investment.
Yes, and that's a basic. And I really believe a lot of teachers are not happy as well. And if the parents pay attention to what their students are learning and look at, I don't think they even have, do they have textbooks anymore?
No, they probably have it online. Probably, do they have actual books anymore, or do they have it on tablets?
I mean, it was books when I was in school. I remember.
Well, me too. Yeah. I remember lugging them home from the train station.
And the 75-pound backpack.
Yeah, right, exactly.
You know what? When I was in school, which was many, many years before you, we didn't have backpacks. So I carried them
You had a strap. I had a strap
I
around
didn't
mine.
have anything. I just carried them like this, and I had to walk up a long hill. It was a quite a walk to get home, but you know what? You did what you had to
You did
do,
what you had to do.
right? It was exercise.
That's it. Strong muscles.
So, okay, so ethics, education.
And
What it comes down to is one of the frustrations that we see is a lack of creative problem solving
In the legislature or
everywhere.
and just everywhere where first it's not that Vermont, we have the talent in the state to solve problems. I mean, we can, the talent exists, and they've shown this, the legislature has shown that when they're really motivated to do something, that, I mean, look how fast they passed, they passed marijuana, and they passed gun laws. I mean, how quickly that went through. So, I mean, it's clearly when they want to do something, they can do it. And I firmly believe that the talent exists within the state to solve some of these tax problems, and it's a matter of bringing the people to the table and saying, let's set aside, let's look at the problem and the people who are affected by the problem and really work for them and say it's not about anything other than the Vermonters who are paying their tax check. And I believe that we can come up with creative solutions to these economic policies, and especially with the schools and the funding of the schools. CFV put through a proposal last year that we're going to spend some time developing this summer that received a ton of support from all sides of the political spectrum.
What are you going to do?
And it's
very exciting.
And it's based on a proven model, so this isn't just picking something and hoping it works. It's been done before in other states. It's been done on a small scale within the state of Vermont. So it's a proven model. And what this is taking advantage of, there's been almost a 1,000% increase in what are called FO1 visas applications, which are students from international countries who want to come and pay to go to Vermont public schools and go to U.S. public schools. These are students who will write a check to the school district for between $30,000 and $50,000 to come and study within the state. So we've done the numbers, we've ran the numbers, and there's examples out there. There was a school district in Maine that was facing a massive local tax hike because of their school budget, and they started this program and they brought in it was like fewer than a half dozen of tuition-paying students. So still working within the capacity of the school itself, not overloading a classroom with a huge number of students, but working within the capacity of the school. They brought in a number of students paying $30,000 to $50,000 apiece. That money went directly to the school, and they were able to avoid a town-wide tax hike because of this. So
some of our independent schools do it now.
Yeah, Thetford Academy is one.
So where do these students live? Who pays for their lodging?
They do.
They do. And their health care?
They do.
They do, okay.
I mean, obviously,
And
there's details of making sure where they stay, that the people are well screened, and they're taught how to deal with a young person.
So there is an initial, setting up the program. And to just be clear that we're talking about working with students that come from countries that have an equivalent education system. So if somebody wants to come in and study at a 10th grade level, they have proven proficiency to study at a 10th grade level. So the burden has not been, the way the program is designed is there's a rigorous process that makes sure that there's no burden on the school system that they're coming in. There's no financial burden to the school system or to the community.
Was it Ben Kinsley who was pushing this?
He started it,
Yeah,
yes.
that's one that he
And
started.
I wrote to him on the computer and I said, I see this as an additional problem. I'm being controversial
Yep,
or
that's okay.
adversarial. But if I were queen, I often say, and we all know I'm not, but what I would do, I would look at the school budget, I would look at where we're spending our money. Instead of bringing in more people from outside, let's fix our problem at home. We're spending
right.
way too much money.
This would be one piece of the puzzle. So this program isn't meant to, because you're absolutely right. We don't want to ignore the fact, our student to teacher ratio, for example.
That could be fixed here.
Campaign for Vermont has long been
Let's
saying
for
we
that.
need to adjust this to a more realistic number, that we can make these minor changes to the student teacher ratio with no detriment to the quality of the education. We need to address unfunded pension liabilities. So we're not positing this program as an end-all be-all solution, but when we're talking about creative solutions, instead of exclusively looking at the problem as an excess of overhead, which we do have an excess of overhead,
Big time.
is there a way, can we also look at this at the same time as an excess of capacity? And
Diversity,
and
making a class a little bit more diverse, which we don't have here in Vermont very much.
Well, what we do have for diversity is the various abilities of students in one
Well,
classroom.
that kind of diversity.
And if we look at, for instance, back to the old days when I was in school, one teacher, 25 students, no problems. If you put a spitball across the room, you were in the principal's office. We have a problem with families, dysfunctional families. We have a problem with drugs. We have a problem with, I hate this, but bullying. You know what? When I spoke to the students at the school, I said, if you bully another child, you are telling the world a whole lot more about who you are as a person than you are about the person you're bullying.
That's true.
And schools don't have to allow children to curse at the teacher or whatever. The parents need to be, or guardians, whatever, need to be brought into the school until you get your child to mind and behave and be respectful. You're going to have to find another option.
Yeah, except those children go back, when you're talking about the families, they go back to the same families every night. And a lot of them come back into the schools pretty much with the same mindset, because they're in that environment of the family environment, which needs to change as well.
Absolutely.
Right? And it's very hard. I think it's harder to change all these things than you would hope.
How did we get here?
I don't know, Linda. Oh.
It's like, I hate to keep getting back to this, but again, when I was speaking with the students, I said, if no one in your life has high expectations of you,
That's right.
then you start having high expectations of yourself. Because that's where a lot of it falls down.
Right.
When the parents don't say, look, I expect you to mind in the classroom, I expect you to do your work, set the expectations. And it's not okay if you do this, and there'll be consequences. But the schools are afraid to penalize anybody, then you're...
Because the parents get on their case.
Not my child, right?
Because I'm very involved with Prevent Child Abuse Vermont, and the stories that you hear are, and now you mentioned opioid crisis, because the opioids are such a problem here in Vermont. Actually, the child abuse, it's more child neglect because of the opioid. The child abuse numbers aren't rising as quickly as child neglect because of the parents being on opioids. So how do you fix all that? Who knows? I mean, it's not going to happen tomorrow.
Well, I can tell you one thing that I firmly believe. If you break the law, there have to be consequences. You don't get out on furlough. You don't get, 10 days confined to your home. depending on what the infraction is. But there have to be consequences for the wrong actions, illegal stuff.
Right.
And the courts are way easy today. Every time I look at that page in the paper filled with, the court docket, I say, holy mackerel. Maybe the jails are filled and they don't have room. Maybe we need a juvenile detention center. I don't know.
Well, the governor tried to build a bigger, better prison that would have all of the services that
Yeah,
these prisoners
I know.
need all under one roof, and I haven't heard that discussion, so I think
I think that
died
was
on a
put down
wall.
at least
Yeah.
up here.
Yeah.
Well, and one thing I hear you talking about too is this, giving, having resources available to work with children from different backgrounds and to have different aspirations, and that's falls into both allowing schools to have some of those really important budgets that sustain some of those really important programs like after school programming and sports programming, arts programming, so that kids have something to do after school instead of going home and just playing video games
But the schools are playing parent.
and
We're
Right, well-
asking them to.
but if you have so instead of if you have sports programs which are getting cut left and right,
Are they?
and a lot and
Because
after
of
school
money?
because of money issues, after school programming is just disappearing, and so you end up with students that instead of going and hanging out with friends, building camaraderie, learning some life skills,
Leadership skills.
they go home to an empty house because both parents are working, and they play video games alone in
That's
a
when
room.
I did my homework.
And
Called us latchkey kids, I think. Wasn't that the term?
And-
They still use that?
I haven't.
Yeah, latchkey. That's what it is.
You know what? Go ahead. Finish.
Well, and then the other part of that too is working to allow you have this. When I was in high school, the message that I was getting constantly is the only path for you is you go to college, and then if you go to college, you just get whatever job you want, and then you're fine. Well, that's not how it works. You go to college, you take on a ton of debt. Maybe you chose, when you're 18 and you choose what you want to go to school for. Maybe you actually know what you're choosing. Maybe you learn
you
later
don't.
on it's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
And so working, and in one of the workforce development bill that they were putting through, really, it was a good step towards this, working with schools so that kids that are in schools know that there are different paths that they can take, that they don't need to feel like, well, I'm not a college bound type of person.
That's okay.
That's fine, and a lot of times like going to college isn't the right decision
It's
for
very
somebody,
expensive.
and I'll use my father for an example. Like he didn't go to college, and he started a business, and now he's got a extremely reputable, well-respected, large landscaping company
Good for him.
in Vermont. And so working within the schools to put these programs forward to help kids and say, okay, instead of going home after school and doing nothing after school or doing your homework and then just playing video games till midnight, let's help connect you with an apprenticeship so you can go and help out at a couple hours at a mechanic's shop and
After
learn
school, not during.
After school.
after school and learn some of these hands-on skills that will really set them up to where they can graduate high school and have a set of skills that allow them to get really well-paying, good
And
career-oriented
that's why we're
jobs.
pushing the tech ed portion of the workforce development bill, because not every student is set up to go to college. They don't like the teacher-student relationship. They like hands-on things. They learn better. And when you graduate, you only graduate perhaps with a few $1,000s in debt rather than 30, 40, 60,000.
$100,000, yeah.
100. Oh,
Yeah,
more than
it's
100.
staggering. And you expect them to get a job and to start their lives, and they have no money.
Eric, my brother is the same type of example as your dad. Well, similar. My brother didn't go to college, but he went to work and learned various skills
for him.
on the job, and I'm so proud of him. He can do it. He can do so much. It's just working on cars, working with electricity, putting in floors or roofing or cabinets or you name it. He just amazes me. And whenever he comes, I have a list.
Exactly.
And he
To
loves
do.
it. He loves it. I think doing those things feeds
Feel
him.
good, sure.
Yes, makes him feel good.
Well, and it gives you a sense of value.
Accomplishment, yes.
And then that also, the other side of that too is that transfers into the economic side of the equation, which is Vermont is in desperate need for skilled labor force right now. There are tons of jobs out there, and there are businesses clamoring for employees in Vermont that are saying, we just can't find qualified people in the state.
Governor, yeah.
And that a lot of that is because we haven't been, there's this stigma around not taking your traditional, like, you go to high school, you go to college. There was, when I was in high school anyways, like, there was a stigma against that path, and that's just, it's totally unfounded. And I think we're seeing the result of this when businesses that do want to do business in Vermont, they can't find the people to work for them.
That's all how it's marketed. I worked for a company here in the United States that had their headquarters in Switzerland, and they're so big on tech centers over there. When I would go over and hire some of the graduates to come back here, and I had a lot of Swiss people, they knew, it was like bringing back graduates of Harvard or Yale.
Really?
They knew how valuable most of them were scientists in the lab. They just knew how valuable these people were, but we don't sell it like that. We sell it like where you go if you don't make it into high school or college. It's sad because our businesses need it and the kids need it for their success.
Maybe we need to have a tech school.
Well, we've got
technology school.
We have 14 of them, and actually,
Well,
after high school.
No,
high school.
There's one connected to BFA, for instance. Yeah, those students are learning a lot of skills, which is good. Now, the governor said he went to 6 businesses, I think he said, and each one of them could hire right now 20 to 100 people, and they couldn't find people who were qualified. Now, that may include drug use, that may, not pass a drug test. It could be that they just haven't learned, what they need to know to fit into that opportunity. So I wonder, I don't know if the governor said, what were the skills that were needed for those jobs to be filled?
Right.
That would be an interesting thing to know.
In Switzerland, those businesses would be on the board of directors of the tech center. And I don't know how involved that our businesses are in developing the curriculum at our tech center.
And then giving
this is what I need. Can you
the insight into the training that would be needed? That's interesting.
Yeah, they of course they all pay money to be. There's a lot of money from the private sector, but that's how they work it in Switzerland and Austria. It's very big
Well,
business.
we can always learn.
Yes, we can.
And as you say, every child doesn't fit into the same shoe.
That's right.
You know, and so we just have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
Well, and by providing by providing our businesses with the necessary skilled labor, and by providing the businesses with the resource, the human capital, I guess you could call it, but with skilled employees, you create a system where the businesses can then grow and they can succeed, and then the businesses can prosper. And when you have businesses starting to grow and prosper, they can start paying their employees more. And then when you get employees that are making more money, that feeds the overall state economy, and it allows people the security to stay within Vermont and not feel like they have to go elsewhere to find an affordable living. So it really, starting at that base area of giving people the tools that they need to build a life in a way that is genuine to them is absolutely vital.
I agree with that. We had what was it called? Industrial arts.
Oh, sure.
And also, I took, because my mother said, you will, she was an excellent seamstress, and they offered, starting in 4th grade, they offered sewing. So I took sewing class, just one, like once a week or something, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th grades, and 12th grade, 11th grade, I did cooking. And that was good for homemaking as well as self-sufficiency. I made a lot of my clothes. I made curtains and drapes and all kinds of things,
That's great. We don't do that anymore. The kids don't
I
do it.
know, homemaking and
But our tech centers, some of them have some of the best restaurants. They're open to the public. It's like 4 or 5 star dining. They're fabulous. There's a couple of them that when I worked for the state, I used to make sure when I traveled, I'd be down there right around lunchtime because it was spectacular. It was
really?
really great.
Well,
Culinary arts.
I know that the culinary students
Yeah.
at BFA, sometimes if there's an event going
They'll
on,
cater it.
they will cater it,
Right,
yeah,
yeah.
which is good.
So we're going over some of the things that we're going to be working on this summer, and we are going to work on that foreign student thing. So you'll have to give us a chance to give you the proposal, because I think once you
the
see
data is
it all
there.
flushed out, you'll understand what we're trying to do.
And that's one of, like, when we, in addition to transparency and accountability, our other guiding philosophy is policy that's based in data, and trying to, not necessarily remove, but have more of a balanced discourse when we're looking at policy and saying, we feel this way about this issue, and we have an emotional reaction to this issue that makes us want to pass policy about it. But is the data there to back up the policy? Does it make sense to pass these policies about it?
The facts.
And are the facts there? And with this international tuitioning student, we've spent hundreds of hours running the data, looking at the models where it's been done before, and there's an enormous amount of potential with it.
All I would say to that is, if you're going to try to bring foreign students into Vermont schools, check out to see which are the most productive schools.
Yeah, and that
we
would
don't want them to
be
fail for sure.
that would be a big part of it is
Making
both
a good match.
making sure that it's a good match, and there would be an initial, to roll a program out like this statewide, there would be an initial investment that would have to happen, but we did the numbers
by whom?
in on a state level, because there would have to be a funded group that does make sure that the students who are coming here meet proficiency standards, and make sure that the students who are
so
coming
they fit in and are
here
up to
properly
speed.
go through all of the federal visa and immigration and background check process. But the way we ran the numbers, and essentially it's after the first 300 students statewide, the program starts, it's just paying for itself
300,
statewide.
Trust us, Melinda. You'll see.
lots of luck.
Yeah, because the other thing I did want to talk about before we run out of time was this summer we're going to spend a lot of time on the Lake Champlain cleanup and present an idea to the legislature to finally fund that project and move the cleanup of the lake along, because we have let that go way too long. It's been, every year we
It's
talk
an enormous
about it.
unfunded liability
and,
right
and
now.
they've disbanded the was it rooms and meals tax. That hasn't gone anywhere yet. And
Well,
they have to clean it up. It's just
it's going to
our
take
economy.
50 to 100 years
We have to start.
get that cleaned up.
Yep.
Millions have been put in previously by New York and Canada and Vermont. I agree. I mean, it's a great resource for the state, and it should be cleaned.
Yep.
But then we have to look at, the boats, like there's a new slip here that's gone in for up to 100 boats
Oh, really?
in St. Albans, I believe that's accurate. And I think it's open now. And so when boats are coming in from different bodies of water, Is there a way
they
to
bring it in?
check them for mussels or whatever
right.
on the bot? You know,
Yeah.
where does all this come
Yeah,
from? The
'cause-
farmers have gotten a lot of flack for, runoff and so forth. And it's a great idea, but it's going to
But we just we have to start. And I think once we start, because we have been assured by a few folks that come on our show that when we talk about Canada, New York, and Vermont, we have found the problem, and it's us.
Yeah, Vermont is
we are the
is
problem.
by far the largest contributor of pollution
So
to the lake.
And we're not doing anything.
And it's one of those things where it's going to cost a crazy amount of money, but it's going to cost us ultimately more money not to do it. And it's a balance of where does the money come from, but we have to,
That's
the
a
longer
great
we
question.
wait, the more money it's going to cost us. Eventually we have to, we have to make the investment.
Well, look, we have, that's one big issue. And then we have I believe it's state employee and teachers and maybe municipal, that retirement fund.
Oh, the pension.
Is that state employees?
That is true. That's state employees, teachers, plus their health care. And it totals, according to David Coates, $4.5 billion. And
A year?
No, that's the whole liability.
No, it's 5 point.
No, it's
something.
4.5 billion. Billion.
It's over 5 billion.
Oh, I don't know. I just had David on. He said 4.5 billion.
Okay, all right,
But
we won't quibble.
At that point, who cares? 4.55.
So, but why, it was
Talking
not
billions.
long ago, it was 2 billion.
I know.
And here's my question, I'm a questioner, in case you hadn't noticed.
No, that's good.
Why are you paying for the retirement of these folks? Nobody paid for mine.
Well, that's part of the benefit of being a state employee, and there was a commitment made. They should have started this. There was a committee put together by the legislature back in 2009. They gave recommendations. Nobody did anything. And if they had done it then, it would have been 20 years, which would be pretty soon, and we would be done with this.
The same with healthcare.
Yeah, same thing. Same thing. They keep pushing it off. That's why Eric and I would talk. We're going to look at always using these one-time funds every year. We use one-time funds to save us, and we don't change the structure. If you don't change the structure, you'll be back in the same issue next year.
You can't keep making the same mistakes and expect
Right.
things to work out.
Right.
It's the definition of insanity.
Einstein.
Trying the same
exactly.
thing over and over again and trying to
Expecting a different
just
result.
constantly solve problems with one-time funding is
And you
not a
can't-
sustainable solution.
you
We end up
can't
in the
keep
same position every year.
Spending more money than you
That's right.
have.
That's right.
And why don't the people in government get that?
I don't know, because they hear the same thing when they're out on the campaign trail. That's what kills me.
Okay, these are questions, folks, for you to ask candidates.
Yes.
Will you cut the spending? We're down to 2 minutes.
And how, you know?
Yes.
Because my tagline, listening beyond the sound bites, when they say, my example is when they say free, start asking questions.
Exactly.
Because there's no such thing.
Talk to Bernie.
Yeah,
Free education,
exactly,
free this, free
I don't
that.
think so.
Oh, yeah, socialism,
Yeah.
number
Can I
one.
just put in a pitch? If
Quickly.
anybody is interested in getting involved with Campaign for Vermont, we are looking to expand our board and our advisory committee, which we would like technical experts that we could tap into on education, on the economy, on whatever else you'd like to help us with. We would love to have you join us.
Absolutely.
Good, good. Well, I want to thank both
Thank
of you
you.
for coming on.
Thank you.
And sharing what you're doing
Thanks.
and discussing a lot
A lot of energy in this group.
Yes, there is. All three of us.
Yes, exactly.
So we're down to the last minute. Thank you for what you do. It's a pleasure to meet you.
You as well.
It's always a pleasure
dear.
to see Pat.
Thank you.
And folks, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned quite a bit from our discussion. And feel free to look up campaignforvermont.org, right?
Sign up for our Eric's letters every week.
Yes, I should do that too. Why don't you send me?
Yeah, we go after anybody and everything.
Okay, me too. So thank you for tuning in tonight, folks. Have a great week ahead. And we have Memorial Day coming up soon and June Dairy Festival. It's going to be a really fun, busy time. So God bless and have a great week ahead, and I'll see you next week. Good night.